All right, let's get some more details now. Joined by Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Minister, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Thabo, and good evening to the viewers and listeners. Thank you very much to have me this evening.
So you begin, of course, by outlining the reasons you are making these proposals in the white paper, but key amongst them is the fact that you are saying we want to press a reset button for South Africa. There are three things that come up from me, and you must tell me which one really is the reason, or maybe all the above, but each one, of course, have got serious other questions that come with it. One, you're saying we're doing this because we made a serious mistake. It's not the fault of the UN. But two, you're saying jurisprudence is unfavorable to the state. And three, you are saying we don't have the socioeconomic resources for the kind of dispensation that we have in place. Which one is the real reason there that you are doing this and doing this now?
All of the above, they are all very applicable. And there are lots of people who ask me, why is this happening now? I said it may as well be the same as asking why did we got our liberation only in 1994. But the fact is that, let's look at the Immigration Act, which was passed in 2002. It came into effect in 2004. That very same year, there was already an amendment. From there, 4 other amendments followed. It has been amended 5 times, meaning there was recognition immediately that there is something wrong with this act. And the amendment were sort of just knee-jerk all over to resolve a small problem here and there, but then it will cause others. So as it is now, when you look at the Immigration Act, even some Home Affairs officials could no longer know what to apply, or they no longer recognize it. So you can't keep on amending something that from the beginning had flaws. You repeal it and you start from the beginning. Yeah. That is why I talk about reset. The same as the Citizenship Act, which I said, Thabo, if you look at it, passed in 1995, we have gone through it very thoroughly and found that it's actually a replica of the 1949 Act, which was established by the British during the Union, specifically to stop, during that period, Thabo, the British were sending people all over as land draws and whatever names they were going to have. They were all males, and they knew that many of them will make license with local women, and they were desperate that the children from such license must not be regarded as British citizens. Yeah. Now, how do we pass? Yes, that's exactly how it is. Yeah. That's why when you read it, it keeps on saying father, father, father. It never mentioned mothers. It mentioned fathers because these were British. But what we did in 1995 was just to replace the mother, the word father, with parent, because we wanted to make it non-sexist. But the sentence sort of remains the same. So it is something that we must repeal because it does not have our DNA. Yeah. Then comes the Refugee Act, enacted in 1998. Let's look at the era during which it was enacted. Winds of change were blowing all over Africa. Countries that never used to have constitution were starting to have them. Countries where rulers could rule forever started levying restrictions that you can only sit for two terms or 3 terms, and the countries that were ruled by coups were derecognized. And during all that time, we thought the change is there everywhere, and we made a Refugee Act under those auspices. In other words, believing there are not going to be a lot of people that will need refugee for persecution and wars and all that. But as we have seen, the situation has changed. Yeah. Almost every week there's a coup somewhere on the continent. So we believe we must reset. The time for reset has arrived.
So would you say the serious mistake, let's start with that first reason, was as a result of omission, just omitting to do what was supposed to be done because of, 1, laziness maybe to do so, or 2, because you were just, you didn't have the capacity in terms of capability and competence in drafting the laws or changing them in a meaningful way as you're putting it now? Or 3, it was because of commission. In other words, you were a deliberate participant in this because one could say for one other reason you were committed maybe to the ideology of Pan-Africanism and you would have wanted to promote that even through the policy framework that would have existed at the time.
Actually, what we did is not Pan-Africanism. Not at all. Because when the United Nations Convention of 1951 was passed and the United Nations Protocol of 1967 was passed, the OAU was worried. When they look at them, they realized that this looks like it's solving the problem for Europe and the West and not Africa. We need our own. And one of the things they've done, Thabo, was Article 3. If you look at Article 3 of the OAU Convention, it clearly states that refugees have got an obligation to obey the laws of the countries in which they are. It even goes on to say once you are a refugee or asylum seeker, you must avoid attacking countries from where you came from, etc., etc. Now, if you look at it, it differs from the United Nations Convention of 1951 because the United Nations Convention, its centerpiece is non-refoulement, meaning what? A person who has run to a country for persecution cannot be taken back there if where they are going to be, they might be persecuted again or even executed or even arrested. But even then, the United Nations, in that Article 33, they knew that there will be exceptions. There will definitely be exceptions. It can't be a general rule that all the people who are running are genuine and are angels. There will be rascals among them. There will be genocides. There will be murderers. There will be killers. There will be syndicates. They knew that. So United Nations itself added a rider in the form of Article 33, subsection 2. But in South Africa, when we domesticated only Article 33, subsection 1, and leave the one that leaves you a leeway. That's why we have got problems of rascals all over the world running to South Africa when they are in trouble. But AU said, no. We don't even want these exemptions. We put it directly. Anybody who accede to this article is already having this exemption about refoulement, about returning people. And we reserve the right to return them if we think they are endangering the security of the state. That is Pan-Africanism. So we did not even do that.
So when did you then realize this issue of, let's stay with the Refugee Protection Act, that there are reservations that you didn't take advantage of? In 2019, in the department, there was a presentation made to me about visas, and they showed countries there and their accession to the United Nations Convention. There were 6 countries. One of them was South Africa. All the 5 countries on the African continent, they showed that there are reservations. Only South Africa. My next question, Thabo, was how many other countries don't have reservation, or how many others have got reservations? And I tried to conduct the United Nations office here local to give me the whole list. And of course, I never got it. And I don't know the good reason why it was not forthcoming. But when the president appointed Minister Aaron and myself to co-chair the IMC on immigration, as you know, to deal with matters of work of foreign nationals versus nationals, because Parliament forced the president to do so, or rather requested him, because they were worried, and he promised them that committee. Now, Minister Aaron chose experts to help us. In one of the meetings, there were international experts. There was a professor from Australia. And I mentioned this issue that I've seen something like this. I do not understand it about reservations, because some of the reservations are discovered. It's about Article 17, which is paid employment. Then the professor said, no,
I actually have the complete list here. I can send it to you. And when I received that list, I discovered that, almost every country where it's sold have got reservations, and most of them are socio-economic, cultural, religious, and even because of local issues. Then I realized that there's something wrong. I went deeper to study this whole thing. And indeed, I found that there are problems. Some of them being about the court cases, as I'm talking about jurisprudence, that these laws are not speaking to each other because we go to court and quote the immigration law. When you arrive there, the opponents or the judges show you that, but the refugee law is saying something opposite to what the immigration law is saying. Then we started that 4 years ago to start this journey toward changing. And for the past 18 months, I've been engaging the ruling party, starting from its policy conference, then coming to its national conference, that we need to make these changes.
Yeah. One would say, using that reasoning, would say, well, you are taking the judiciary because of your own laws that you seemingly don't know well. And when the judges then rule, and you're saying, no, the judges are not favorable to the state, when it's actually your laws that are not favorable to you.
Thabo, read my statement very well. I never attacked the judiciary. I said because of these gaps and because of these omissions, the judges have developed a jurisprudence based, I actually say based, on the fact that there were no reservations and exceptions. Based on that, they developed jurisdiction, which jurisdiction end up being unfavorable to the state. So it's not a blame against the judges. I'm just showing that they are making this jurisdiction on the basis of what is there. I mean, this jurisprudence, to say, on the basis of that, what is there. That's why we need resetting.
Yeah. So you are envisaging completely pulling out of this convention and the protocols, 1967 protocol and 1951 convention, completely pulling out of it?
No, not completely. We said review or pull out with a view to re-enter with the exemptions and reservations which many countries, if not all, have done, which we should have done in 1996, but we didn't do. In other words, we are saying United Nations, we are resetting, and we believe our agreement with you is faulty. We want to pull out of it, correct it, and bring it back to you. So it's not pulling out altogether.
Now, once again, staying with the Refugee Protection Act, you mentioned in terms of immigration, for example, that even now you're not even sure where statistics South Africa would have the exact numbers because people don't tell you where they are from. They just merely tell you that they are South African. And so you don't know the exact number of people who could be here in the country without the necessary document. But when we speak about refugees and the Refugee Protection Act, except for the matter that we have been speaking to you about with those folks in Cape Town, which you are saying you found that actually one of them is not even an asylum seeker, is now opening a political party and so on and so forth. What other instances are you dealing with there in terms of people abusing the Refugee Act and the loophole that you have now found to be existing in the South African law?
Well, Thabo, let me clarify it. We know the people who are refugees in South Africa. We know those who have applied for asylum, who contacted us. What I was talking about was people who are illegal because they simply don't announce themselves. They go into hiding because they know they are illegal. If you expect me to know the number of Zamazamas in the country, we only don't know those we catch. People who are illegal, we know those we catch, and that's why we are deporting between 15,000 and 20,000 per annum. But that's out of those we catch. Those we don't catch, we don't even know how many there are. Now, I was responding to some of the claims that no, but State South Africa have said there are so many foreign nationals in the country, and the figure is very low. And I contacted State South Africa, the statistician general. He said, Minister, when we do a census, we don't ask people, we don't investigate where people came from. We don't ask for documents because we don't have that mandate. That is a mandate of Home Affairs. We ask them. What they tell us is what we write there. And I went further to say, You don't expect the person who's illegal to tell South Africa that I'm actually illegal here.
Yeah.
You can't. They have to be discovered. They can't disclose that information. So what State South Africa has put there is what people have told. Their work is to count. And they've counted that there are 62 million people in South Africa. Fair enough. But as for them to know which ones are illegal or not, that is not the question they ask.
Yeah. But I'll come back to that. Let's stick with the refugee one. I mean, you mentioned, for example, economic refugees or something of that nature. How many do we know are really economic refugees, and that's how they came in as economic refugees? And how many are there in South Africa that actually don't need that particular status, but they used it and they came in through that particular status?
Actually, there are no economic refugees, Thabo. Because a refugee, by definition, is a person who entered to a country because they are running away from something. And in the United Nations Convention, they recognize three things: war, or natural disasters like fire, floods, volcanoes, and earthquakes. And then three, persecution. And you may be persecuted under four areas. You may be persecuted because of your political activities and practices. Two, you may be persecuted because of your religious activities and practices which the rulers in that country don't like. You may be persecuted because of your traditional practices. And lastly, because of your sexual orientation. Now, once that is proven, you get refugee status. You can't come in and say, I'm an economic refugee. There's nothing like that. That's why I'm mentioning that they are economic migrants. Because a migrant is just a person who's moved from one country to the other, whereas a refugee is running away. Migrants mostly are people who are looking for jobs, economic opportunities, and a better life. And I'm saying many of them are those ones are economic migrants, not refugee. A refugee specifically, the one who ran away. And once you win your refugee status, you are under international protection. Yeah. You've got to be protected by that country.
Yeah, because, I mean, part of why you've been taken to court and people are fighting you, they'll tell you that, well, there are people who are here who have started businesses now. They could be vendors, they could be builders and gardeners and doing whatever sort of business that they're running in the country. And they are saying, well, they're here because the economic situation in their country is bad. And now you are telling them, no, there's no war there, they must go back. They're saying, no, but this minister doesn't understand that things are tough there and we're here because of the question of the economy. And others are saying we are applying for that particular status. They call themselves asylum seekers.
I actually understand everything, Tom. That's why I mentioned it. What you are saying is true. Nobody comes here and says, I'm an economic migrant, meaning I'm hungry, or I need a job, or I need a better life. Nobody does that. They all come under auspices of asylum, and that's why it's difficult, and they accuse us of rejecting them. Yes, the refugee status determination officer, when you arrive there at the refugee reception center and tell them that you are an asylum seeker or a refugee, you ran away, they ask you for the reasons. And when you say war, or you say natural disasters or persecution, and they investigate and they find none of this, they reject you because the international convention, all three of them, which we have acceded to, and the domestic legislation, none of them talks about economic migration. That's why one of the recommendations in the white paper is that South Africa must make laws on refugee and asylum as well as on economic migration. It must differentiate. I even gave an example of Canada, that Canada has got that. If we agree as a country that we're going to accept economic migrants, the parameters must be set. People must not come here under wrong premises and say, look, I'm being persecuted, and just concord some persecution that is there. Because that's the only entry. That's the only entry that is there. So it means in order to stop that, we've got to have a special legislation or special policies or protocols about economic migration. At the moment, we don't have, none of the conventions have got it, none of our domestic law has got it. And now we are proposing that it must be there.
Yeah. And so the policy framework would be one that supports refugee protection for safety reasons only. But even that, you are saying that you want to evoke the first safe country principle, largely because of the situation. I think is the group of Afghanistans who went through Pakistan, they went through a couple of countries, including Zimbabwe. But they said, no, we prefer this country because the laws here in the country are much easier to deal with.
They are not the only ones. I just gave them as a clearing example because everybody knew about them, Thabo. I'm sure you know about them.
Yeah.
Because all of you called me to interview about them. But there are many. There are many people who cross mountains and rivers and oceans just to come here. And when you check, they've crossed a lot of borders. And you know, I mean, look at the issue of Thabo Bester and Nandi, but they ended in Tanzania. Tanzania doesn't share a border with South Africa. It is. There are countries in between, but they cross them to go into Tanzania. The same is happening to us, where countries are crossed and people come here, and it's then that they apply for asylum. And we're saying, what about, because we are aware that many countries have done that, no, but the first country you have entered, why didn't you apply for asylum there? We used to have people who will come from Somalia and Pakistan, who go through Kenya and use Nairobi airport to come into South Africa. And we had to meet the Kenyans and say, no, because Kenya wanted the visa-free status in South Africa. They wanted to come here without applying for visas. We agreed, but we said the condition for agreeing is that why are you allowing your people as a springboard to come into our country? We signed with them what we call a returns agreement. And I'm happy to announce that Kenya was the first country in the whole world that agreed with us to sign a returns agreement, meaning what? Meaning that if we find anybody who's in the country illegally and he came in from that particular country, which is Kenya, we send them back to Kenya. We have just signed the returns agreement with Lesotho, and we are pushing that we must sign it with other countries. And Thabo, you remember the people who were holed up in a church in Cape Town, in the Methodist Church.
Yes.
Some of them escaped via some trucks illegally to Namibia. The minister there phoned me. We don't have a returns agreement with Namibia, but we have got very good working relationship, and we are experiencing no problems from Namibia whatsoever. So he phoned me, he said, I know these people are not South Africans, but they came in through your country, and I'm sending them back. And there was no way I could refuse because we work very well with Namibia. But what they've done is more or less like what happens in the returns agreement. So we are saying come to a particular country. What's the reason? Yeah.
And now I know the civil society groups will say, well, this minister went on TV and he admitted that no one can account for illegal immigrants in this country because, I mean, they're illegal. So by nature, they don't want to be discovered. And so you'll never know who they are. So how can he come and use a reason of socioeconomic resources that cannot be able to accommodate all these people if he doesn't even know how many they are?
I don't have to know how many there are because I won't even know. I've already said so. But Thabo, you get it from the lived experience of people. Those who want these numbers are living in areas where they don't experience anything. Last year, Thabo, in August, I started going out with the mobile units to rural areas. Every rural area where I arrived, I met with traditional leaders. Because they called me, they summoned me, they said, we know the minister was here. Can he come to the royal house? When I arrived there, they complained about this issue. That minister, what's happening in this country under our democracy? Under normal conditions, when a person comes to my village, they must come to the royal house and be known and ask for space. Here we are seeing people all over here. Some of them are getting married to the locals. After they ran away, the locals ran to the royal family and lodged a complaint. Quite a number of open spaza shops When the sponsorships cause problems, they come to the royal family. And when we ask them, what's this? Many of them said they are allowed under the laws of democracy. That's why I called the workshop tab on the 16th and the 17th of July. We invited all the district mayors. They spoke. They spoke about what they are experiencing in their areas of municipalities. Members of the House of Traditional Leaders from all 7 provinces in the National House, all 7 provinces that have got the House of Traditional Leaders, with the exception of Gauteng and Western Cape. They all came and spoke, and that's why we took resolutions there, because these issues are troubling them. Before we could even implement those resolutions, communities were already running around implementing them because of the tragic things that happened about children dying because of what's happening in the spaza shops. Whether, and some saying we are blaming foreign nationals, all we're saying is that no spaza shop must be established anywhere without being registered, and we want all of them to be registered. So because of people's lived experiences, we know there is trouble.
Minister, when do you see this process wrapping up? Because many people are saying, well, you are making overtures now ahead of the 2024 elections. As soon as the voting is done, you would have forgotten all about this and would have given up on this idea.
That's nonsense, actually. I gave you the history of this thing that started far back in 2019. 2019, there was election, so I started it immediately after the elections. Now, it's very common that anything you do towards an election, they are saying you are doing it for election. If you don't do anything, you said, no, let me wait and not do this thing and allow the election to pass. People will accuse you. Life must go on, elections or no elections. And it's nonsensical that after elections, we'll stop what we are doing when what we are doing started long before elections.
Minister, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. That is Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, Minister of Home Affairs. They're clearing up what are some of the proposals in that white paper in terms of policy framework and why those changes need to be put in place.